So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leader Show. I'm your host today, Adrian Evans, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Andrew Key. So Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Adrian. Great to be here.
Pleasure. Now, we're actually connected by our mutual friend, Keith Douglas. So Keith, a big shout out to Keith for bringing us together. Obviously, our purpose here on the show is to understand the human side of payments, because leaders are invited on here to show how they create winning and human-centered cultures and why they embrace the opportunities first before meeting the challenges. And we know one of the greatest challenges is in this fast-moving industry is how do you build a culture that enables people to realize their potential whilst naturally realizing the growth targets of the company. And one of the most accomplished people seen firsthand and recommended here is Andrew Key. So Andrew is the Group Managing Director of Acquiring at Network International. So he's responsible for growing their business across the Middle East and Africa region. Andrew is a motivated leader who empowers his people, and in many ways, he sees his job is to get out of their way so they can produce their best work. He's created a high-performing and enjoyable people-centered culture. We share very similar values, along with Keith Douglas, of the importance of how you win and not just winning. So, Andrew, really appreciate you taking the time out today. Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, and thank you for that introduction. It's very generous. Thank you.
Pleasure. So I wonder if we could start there with just giving you a bit of background, if you could, of the career and some of the moves and choices you've made within that career.
Sure. Thanks, Adrian. Look, I've been working in the payments industry for more than 25 years now. I won't try and do the maths and embarrass myself. I think the best way to summarize it is it's been opportunistic. I've never been one of the people who sat there with a 5-year goal, and I must achieve this by year 5. Okay. I think my philosophy has been, if you have too hard a goal along those lines, there's a potential for making the wrong choices and a potential to introduce a risk of disappointment. Now, that's me saying it 25 years plus in looking backwards. I do know very early in my days, and my first role was at Barclaycard, part of the Barclays group. I was much more focused, if not a little obsessed, on career progression. And in those days, career progression in my mind was about grade. It was about the level you were operating at. It was very hierarchically driven. But I'd had some very good advice early on in my career from some people who I still count as friends now, who've managed to slowly but surely take my focus off. Progression isn't just about a number. It isn't about a grade. It's about experience.
Okay. Wow. Must be fantastic to get that sort of advice pretty early on in your career about the journey and the experience as well.
Yeah, look, it was fantastic advice, and thank you for Roger Alexander's probably the first people who gave me that advice. But then again, I've been lucky to work with some great people throughout my career. It was great advice. I'll be honest, I hadn't always taken on board all of the advice I was given. A great example, whilst I was working with Keith at MasterCard, things were going very well, very positive. And then I got approached by a former colleague with the opportunity to go and work on the payments aspects of the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. And away from work, I love sport. To me, that was just too good an opportunity to turn down. It was in the home country. It was in London. It was the chance to play a small part in setting up a global phenomenon. But it wasn't in most people's eyes, it was not a great career move. It wasn't something that was going to necessarily enhance my CV, but I did it anyway, and made the call to say, look, it's going to be 2 years. Hopefully it's going to be fun. Hopefully I'll learn some things along the way, but it is a chance to apply what I'd learned in the preceding 10 plus years into a different environment and something I was very passionate about in sport.
Great. So that's fascinating. So I know a number of other people who did very similar things, by the way, because I think they saw 20, and especially around here, near the southeast, there was just this buzz that was
Yeah,
just unique. We had Olympians living in our road, which was just
yeah,
incredible. It
yeah.
was a unique occasion. So looking back on that, how do you feel those 2 years? How did they work out for you? So with the value of hindsight.
Uh, It was, sorry to anyone who's watching this, it was the most fun I've had, the most fun and the hardest work I've had for
Brilliant,
two
brilliant.
years. It wasn't necessarily the most intellectually challenging because
Yeah,
we were doing what we'd done beforehand. Um, but having a team on the ground when the games were running who were supporting 40 something venues every day, they were all volunteers,
yeah,
um, all had to have a level of training. You're on your feet for 10 hours a day.
yeah.
Um, it was physically hard graft rather than mentally hard graft. And for me and my key lieutenants, we were 7 days a week for 5, 6 months running up to the games, to the extent where even though I lived an hour north of London, we relocated and lived in London for the 3 months beforehand, just because it was so full on. And it
Yeah.
was everything from dealing with Visa as a title sponsor around ticketing, or were we embracing their then innovative cashless solutions, through to scrambling around under the bottom of a food truck in Greenwich Park, trying to get an electricity cable in to plug a point of sale device into it. So it was the two extremes, but it
Right.
was a huge amount of fun, a huge amount of fun.
Wonderful.
And it was, I think the other, sorry, reflecting on it, the other part that was the deadline was the deadline. So in
Mm,
terms of delivery, we've all worked on big projects and programs
mm,
in the organizations we've worked in that have a deadline. This really was the deadline. There was
yeah.
no slippage. That date at the start of July, you had to be ready. It had to work. Which was, again, it was because it was that hard a deadline. It gave everybody the focus,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was no choice but to make it happen.
So you're just bringing back some memories for me, because I was lucky enough to help the exec team of the Olympic Delivery Authority post
Wow.
games, and
Yeah,
I put up this slide at the end, and some of it was from the morning Sydney Morning Herald as well as the Beijing Times, etc. Basically, it's saying "Well done, London," and it
yeah,
was just like, you guys nailed this.
yeah,
You know, there was no slippage. It was as games and the overcosts and this, that, and the other. And I've never seen a games quite. Obviously, I was lucky enough as yourself to be quite close to it. I've never seen a games before or after so
yeah.
well run. The stadium was handed over 12 months before. That's just
Yes.
unprecedented. So, no, bringing back some goosebumps of some wonderful memories that we had as well
Yeah.
as a family. Um, so one of the things I've observed, and we've yet to get together and have a beer in the sun there in Dubai for various travel reasons.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that when we've had our conversation, you've said is you see it as your job to almost get out of the way of your team so that they can do their best work. Dare I say I'm quite lucky. There's a lot of leaders I work with who that is the case. However, in the general population, that's not the case. Can you share more with us on that, please?
Yeah, look, it's again, it's pulling on the experience. So when have I been at my best? I've been at my best, I think, when that's happened to me, where you've agreed a goal, and this is a philosophy I tend to adopt. You agree a goal,
Yeah.
you give the person or the team time to think about how they're going to get to the goal, but it's theirs to define how they're going to
Yeah.
get there. Come back, bounce ideas off, raise any concerns, that's fine. But let's agree on the goal. Let's agree how you're going to get it. What do you need to get you there? If it's within my gift to give you those tools, those resources, that investment, whatever it is, great. That's my job to give you what you need on behalf of the broader organization. But then it's about you get on with it. Please come back to me if you've got things
Mm.
you're concerned about. I'm here 24/7. I'm here for you to bounce worries off. I'm here to help you with decisions that you're uncomfortable taking, and we'll take them together. But I've got your back. If you smash it out of the park, brilliant. It's on you. It's on the team. You've done an amazing job. I will make sure I'm stood in the background and I'm not there trying to claim it was me who did it, because all I did was ask some questions and maybe give you some tools to help you on the way. But if it doesn't go wrong, and look, let's not forget we're all in the business of taking risk. Sometimes it doesn't go wrong. If it doesn't go well, it's on me. We talked about it. We agreed it. I'm the senior party in the relationship as far as the organization's concerned. I'll take it. We'll learn the lessons, and we'll learn the lessons together offline. But when it doesn't go wrong, again, that's my challenge to deal with.
Okay. That sounds really straightforward. What you just described, that is so rare. We don't need to look too far in the business world or the political world, where usually there's many people trying to take others' credit, and when it goes wrong, we start pointing fingers. Where's that come from? Has that come from your background or the leaders you've worked with? Where's that blend of responsibility and autonomy combined with humility on your side, and of course some significant managing up? Where's that come from?
Experience first and foremost. It's seeing it. It's before I entered the world of business, and whilst I was studying, I was lucky enough to have some engagement with the military and was sponsored through university and various other things. So there, it's very first hand about where accountability sits. It's very clear. Not always in the best way. So I'm not fully aligned to that's applicability in the business world, but that was my first exposure to the accountability starting and stopping in certain places. But then, as you say, I've been lucky enough to work with some great people. I've had a few experiences throughout my career, and I've worked with people. Every single one of the leaders I've worked with, I can walk you through them for my entire career. I can name them. Many of them are still friends and people I would happily go and work with again tomorrow, because of the environment that they've created, that's allowed me to thrive and given me that opportunity. I think it's human nature as well. Everybody wants to succeed. Everybody wants to have their opportunity to stretch and grow. I mean, if I talk about my role at Network today, I've got people, my leadership team are scattered across 6 countries. So has to be a level of empowerment. There has to be a level of trust just by proximity. I mean, I'm lucky that gives me the chance to travel around, but they're on the ground every day, leading the teams, interacting with the customers, interacting with the regulators. I can't be involved in everything, but even for the team who are based with me in the UAE, I don't want to be. I don't need to be. You're here. I trust you. You're in that position of responsibility and accountability because you convinced me that you've got the right skills. Most importantly, you've got the right attitude. And it starts with attitude. It starts and stops with attitude, frankly. I'm also very lucky in the, lucky, it creates its own tensions as well, but I'm lucky in that of the team I've got, at least half of them are capable of doing my job. Most of them want to do my job. So part of my challenge is actually tempering the enthusiasm to progress.
I'm with you.
And keep us all focused on the common goal and the common outcome. Everybody has individual targets and accountabilities, but we will all succeed together, or we'll all fail together. And it's reinforcing that message. It is a key philosophy, and we spend a lot of time as a team just reminding ourselves that it is about the team. When the time comes and the organization makes a change or I make a change, I want them all to be ready to step into my shoes, but they all do it differently as well. And that's the fascinating bit for me. Playing amateur psychologist, there are very different styles and approaches, but the underpin of all of that is, look, guys and girls, I trust you. I believe in you. We've agreed what we're going to go after. I'll let you make those decisions. If you're uncomfortable, come back to me. If things go wrong, come back to me. But ultimately, you're empowered. I trust you, and trust is one of the most important aspects of any successful relationship. I trust you to make the right decisions on behalf of the organization, and on behalf of our customers, and ultimately on behalf of the team as well.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you for sharing. That really is very insightful, and it's quite often in the audience, we've got quite a lot of younger leaders who are probably in their first position or aspiring for their first position. And I think this piece already on trust is already a common thing. So thank you for sharing that.
And,
so
and
how,
I think, sorry, I was just going to add that I think the other piece, I hate to say this for the younger listeners, because I'm approaching a significant milestone fairly shortly, and it does make you reflect and look back. I think the other thing, and this is a message I constantly give my kids, is if there's more than two people in the room, there's a very high chance I'm not the smartest person in the room.
Yep.
And that is okay. It's a my son 16 doing his GCSEs very shortly. We're having lots of conversations about, come on, son, you need to knuckle down. You've got huge potential. You just got to put a little bit of effort in, and he's constantly reflecting back. Yeah, but your exam results were terrible, Dad. And I keep saying to him, yeah, it's the world's a different place. Josh, you need to get on with it. But you also need to recognize that there are very few roles in life where you can be a true sole contributor. So it's just you on your own. So you've got to get to grips with this working as part of a team thing, because that's life generally. And secondly, you don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah, so true.
You don't have to be the one who can dictate exactly how everything is going to work. I mean, I don't think I've ever worked for a micromanager. I may have done, but they've not had the opportunity to micromanage me. Because that would drive me mad. And again, that's one of my philosophies in terms of leadership approach is, yes, I have to adapt my style to the people's style as well. But ultimately, for me, the most claustrophobic environment in which to try and operate is where somebody is telling me line by line what to do and how to do it. And that just, that I think I try and put myself in other people's shoes. That's a huge turn off and demotivator for me. So I try very hard not to do that.
So there's so much there. And by the way, my son Matthew is just about doing his GCSEs. We're having similar conversations, and it's funny actually. I did one thing from it, just reflected on some of my A levels and just said, a lot of my friends went to uni and I didn't, and I felt like, all right, Charlie, because I didn't, but I just knuckled down. And I wasn't academically the best, but actually what drove me was there was no distraction because everyone else had gone to uni. And I think I was sort of saying to him, don't make that mistake. I didn't want to make that mistake. But it's interesting what you're saying about the smartest in the room as well, is actually, I think, I remember once when I, many years ago, took up triathlon and I joined a cycling club, and a friend of mine said to me, why are you even joining that club? You're the worst by miles. And I said, I know I am. That's exactly why I am joining. Because I tell you what, in 6 months' time, I won't be. I'll be mid-pack or whatever, because they're literally dragging me up. And he said, oh, I've got to be at the top. But I remember thinking, there's nowhere to go. You want to be in rooms, but I love that as well. I think it's a really good one as well to say to people, you don't need to be the smartest. But look, and that's what I love about payments is, I was at the Payments 360, Pay 360 last week, and this community feels far more collaborative than many other industries. And even if you're a huge bank, even if you're a massive scheme, actually, do you know what? You're part of a huge ecosystem and you really can't do very much on your own, even if you're a huge player.
Yeah, oh, completely. Look, the interlinked nature of our industry is there is no one winner. There never will be one winner because there are so many alternatives out there. And that ecosystem where, look, it's, well, use the chicken and egg analogy, but somebody wanting to make a payment and somebody wanting to take a payment, without two sides of that and without the enablement of that, nothing's going to be exchanged. We're back into handing over a chicken in exchange for a cow. And so you've got to have both sides. That interdependence, that intertwined ecosystem is critical. And payments is one of the truly global industries as well. And so that, it's 25 plus years in, I'm still interested, I'm still fascinated, and I'm still learning. So long may that continue.
Wonderful, wonderful. So just moving back to the people piece there. So how do you give people then the confidence to say, do you know what? I believe in you and I believe in your potential. How do you give them the confidence as a leader? How does that happen?
that's the interesting bit, because it's very easy to say it, and it's
Yes.
very easy to say, don't worry, I've got your back if it goes wrong.
Right.
But until it happens, I'm
Yes.
sure, particularly first time exposure to working with somebody new, there's always that level of, does he really mean it? Or is he just going to, at the point where something does go wrong and I look around and, oh, he's disappeared, where is he? I think it starts with not just saying the words, it's sharing some experiences as well, talking about some vulnerabilities, talking about the times when, and I won't go into the specifics, but whilst I was working with Keith, I had one of the most terrifying conversations I've ever had to have with a customer, where the customer, having not followed some advice that I provided on behalf of an organization, had lost millions and millions and millions of pounds. And when you're picking up the phone to have that conversation, it was the most scared I've been in my life,
Right, okay.
in a professional context. And actually it was, and I knew I had the backing of my leadership team and my organization. So I felt like I was supported. And actually, thankfully, on the other side of the conversation was somebody who was understanding of what hadn't been done on their part or their organization's part that had led to this loss.
Okay.
But sharing some examples that show, look, I have lived through where it's not gone well. I have faced into that challenge, and I've done so thankfully with the backing of an organization. So you could position it. It could have been left as, I've screwed up. Let's throw him under the bus. Let's feed him to the lions. That is the upset customer. But that didn't happen at all. It was the complete opposite. It was, okay, as long as you're telling me you've done everything you were asked to do and could have done to try and prevent this as an outcome. Okay, good, we've got it. We'll live with the consequences. We'll live with however the customer reacts, and the customer could have turned it back onto the organization, but it didn't happen.
Okay.
And so it's that vulnerability. It's about when mistakes do happen, and they happen every day, the small ones. I think if you can demonstrate you're practicing what you preach on the small things, it builds confidence that if something more significant were to happen, you're still going to be true to your word, whilst also making sure everybody doesn't become reckless,
Of course,
and
of course.
start taking outrageous decisions and ignoring regulatory and compliance or technology failure
Sure.
or other things. But yeah.
So did that almost give you an empathy then, the fact that you appreciated the immediate line managers around you and the safety and environment that was created for you? So when somebody else now you're presented with has made a mistake, yes, there's a frustration, undoubtedly. There's not the ideal outcome,
Yeah.
etc. Has that created an empathy for you in that moment?
Yeah. Look, it's the. I'm going to sound all spiritual now. I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but years and years ago, I read a few good books on Buddhism.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting aspects that I read that stuck with me was start by putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
So start every conversation thinking about, okay, what emotions are they feeling now? What's going on in their head? What doubts have they got? What insecurities have they got coming into the conversation that you're about to have? So start from that perspective. And the other interesting aspect of it, which occasionally I've had to apply as well, is no matter how infuriating the person is in a different context on the other side of the conversation, and how they might be stylistically totally at the other end of the spectrum from you, how they may not behave in a way that you feel is appropriate in that environment, just remind yourself they might be a great dad, they might be a great sports coach. There is good in that person, even if what you're seeing is you're finding it very difficult to recognize.
Okay. So again, situationally, if we could take this one, so this is fascinating, is situationally, again, it's in those moments, look, and I always say as well, if you stick two people in the room, the one thing you can guarantee is their value set will be different. It could be very, very close, but it's still going to be different. So in the moment, when an outcome is not ideal and you're actually thinking stylistically, you are very different from me, you have a very different, how do you almost take the breath and actually say, you know what, I need to step out of this moment at this because I need to bring my best self to this situation?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But again, I start from the philosophy of, okay, we agreed whatever course of action you were going to take, and it went wrong. So I'm part of that decision-making process. So as much as you may have done it in a very different way to the way I might have approached it, that's okay. But we agreed, we talked about it, we agreed what your guardrails were going to be. As long as you stay within those guardrails, it's as much, it's on me for empowering you to go off and do what you did, as well as for the decision that you took. So it's not about, it's about what are we going to learn from this? First, what do we need to fix to try and get out of the situation and to address whatever's gone wrong? But then secondly, and as importantly, what experience do we take from this? What do we make sure we're not going to do again next time? Second time round, the third time doing the same thing, my sympathetic, empathetic side dissipates quite quickly.
I'd imagine, we're not learning.
But first time, okay, stuff happens. I mean, look, we're not performing open heart surgery at the end of the day. We can materially damage people's businesses and other things, which is not good, but we don't kill people in what we do, typically. So it is about keeping it in context in that sense as well.
Wonderful. Brilliant. So who have been the most influential people in you becoming the authentic leader that shows up as you do today, just being Andrew? Who's had an influence on that?
This is going to sound like a cliched response. Everybody, even people I haven't enjoyed working with, have still had an influence. So it's still. So look, early in my career, I mentioned the name earlier, Roger Alexander. Roger led in a way I'd not seen led before, and it was very early in my career. And again, he I think I try and practice a little bit of what he did, which he never tried to be the smartest guy in the room. He did empower people. He did give them that opportunity to go out and try things. And so that was very influential on me in seeing, because he was, in my eyes then early in my career, he was super senior, and wow, you trust me to go off and do that. That's amazing. And I was in my early ambitious push stage of my life as well. And yet he still went, all right, get on with it then. So that was an interesting one. There are a couple of other leaders while I was in my time at Barclays, two of them kind of simultaneously, Steve Adams and Mark Evans, give them a shout out. Both took a strong interest in my career progression, and I can't remember which one of them it was. So I was heading off in a very commercial angle. One of them, I think it might be Mark actually, turned around and said, you need to get some operational experience. At which point I went, no, I don't. I don't want to run a call center. I don't need to do that. It's fine. And his point was, and he was the managing director at the time, so look, if you want my job one day, you don't have to understand the details of what this particular function is doing, but you do have to understand the dynamics of the people that are fulfilling that function for you. So I ended up leading a back office team of predominantly, and this was in Northampton, 50-plus-year-olds who were processing chargebacks day in, day out, 150, 200 of them, who I'd rock in the morning and go, brilliant, did you see what the share price did yesterday? They're looking at me going, it's 5 to 9, my shift starts in a minute. I am from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock. I'm going to work. I'm going to take my hour of lunch break. but I'm really not interested in the share price. I'm really not interested in the latest quarterly trading update that you might think is fascinating, but has no relevance to me whatsoever. So going and then trying to motivate people, trying to get them to stretch and challenge, embrace new technologies. It was an amazing, probably very uncomfortable for them. It was an amazing learning experience for me, and taught me some huge things. So that was the sort of first 10 plus years. Keith, great guy to work for while I was at MasterCard, and there was another leader there, Hanny, who was he was a nuclear scientist by trade, still is a nuclear scientist by trade, but in the payments industry, who just thought in a way I'd never experienced. I mean, most people would describe him as mad as a box of frogs. I don't think that's fair, but approach problems from such a different perspective in terms of how to stretch the thinking. And again, along with Keith, another great empowerer of people and giving them that opportunity to go on. I think the last shout out I'll give is Simon Haslam. So whilst after my Olympics stint, I popped back to MasterCard briefly for a year. Sorry, MasterCard. It was supposed to be for much longer. And Simon was a client of mine, and I was looking after acquirers across Europe, and saw something that I probably hadn't seen in myself. So whilst he was a client 6 months in, and I didn't know him particularly well, we hadn't had a huge amount of interaction, but he got promoted to a global CEO role, took the guy called Guy, who was running Europe, with him to run the US, because US business, said, why don't you come and run the European business for us at Elevon? And I was a little bit taken aback by it, but I don't really know you, Simon. And yet he went, no, I've seen enough. I think you can do it. And so from my perspective, that was an amazing vote of confidence. It was a difficult decision, because I had gone back to MasterCard with the intention of an elongated stay. But he took the chance. He offered me a role that was leading the European business, that was 1,500 people located in 6 markets, that had a whole bunch of JVs, different operating models. That I think was probably my first real exposure to the differences in culture. So we went from large operational team in Ireland, we had a team in the UK, we had a team in Norway, sizable team in Spain, team in Germany, and a team in Poland, which gave me the opportunity to travel around Europe, which was fantastic. But the exposure to the different nationalities and how the different nationalities worked, what motivated them, was amazing. It was an amazing 3 or 4 year experience, because they're so different. So different in terms of, and I've seen it to an extent now, to a greater extent actually now in my time with Network. But that Simon taking that leap to say, you know what, I've seen enough, whatever it is about you, and I've never actually asked him what it was that made him say, all right, we'll give this guy a shot. But that was fantastic. And then he left and came to Network International, and again presented me with an opportunity to come out here for what has been just an amazing, coming up for 6 years now. And again, exposure in this case to customers in 50 countries, not 6. And when you go from, I think our northernmost customer, Saudi, down to South Africa, across to Algeria and Tunisia, to Nigeria, to Nairobi, to just, again, very, very diverse set of nationalities, very diverse set of customers. And from a payments perspective, luckily for us, a very diverse set of ways of approaching payment, and where the one residing common factor across all of it is cash is king. So for our business, opportunity is significant. But yeah, again, Simon gave me that opportunity, for which, thank you, Simon, I am very grateful. It's been an amazing learning experience, and it's been amazing for the family as well. I mean, selfishly, and it was a selfish decision on my part, it was all about career, but my family were incredibly settled in rural England where we were living. The kids were at a great school. Mum was a teacher at the school. Life was, we just moved into what I described as the dream house that we were never going to leave. And then 12 months later, we sat the kids down and went, right, we're off to Dubai.
Okay.
And yet the exposure for them has been amazing as well.
Yeah.
So they've been exposed to so many different nationalities. They've been exposed to lots of different cultures, lots of different ways. I mean, it's Ramadan at the moment here in well, it's Ramadan globally, but here in the UAE where we're living, that's something they've never experienced. People fasting for 28 days. Why are they doing it? So it's just the questions that living in a different part of the world stimulates. So it's been great for me professionally, but it's also been great for the family as well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Can we dive a bit deeper on that? Because I'm really fascinated because on the multifaceted but also multicultural territory you now have, as you say, we were meant to meet when I was in Dubai, and you said, "Oh, sorry, I'm in Egypt and I'm literally flying back." But then when you look at that territory, as you say, you've got Saudi in the north, you've got South Africa here, the whole of Africa in between. The Middle East is a fascinating place on many different areas. So, how do you, or okay, perhaps what mindset do you have for yourself and your team to take the opportunity across all that variety?
I think the first thing, you've got to be very open-minded.
Yeah.
Because you never really, well, 6 years in, I've had lots of different experiences, but when I first arrived, I would never have anticipated the range of conversations and different approaches to things that I went. So you've got to be open-minded. You've got to, what's been most difficult, I think, is what I would, from 20 years living and operating in Europe as a minimum standard, isn't necessarily the minimum standard that's accepted in other parts of the world and other countries in which you're operating. And that's not knocking them. That's forced me and everyone who operates in a region just to accept that, okay, it takes time. The sales cycle might be different. The level of support you need to invest into that relationship and into that customer might be very different. And that's just because they haven't got the experience of working with a large merchant group in Europe or a large financial institution in Europe. So open-mindedness and acceptance that sometimes you're going to have to work harder than you'd ideally like to try and make things happen, but that's life. Sales cycle is an interesting one. So I've been lucky in the 2 roles I've had at Network. Again, I carry the P&L. The sales cycle can go from 10 minutes, a couple of cups of coffee, and you're done. They've decided that they're willing to work with you. And a lot of it is about you as an individual. And I don't mean Andrew here, but personal relationships are genuinely very important. And at the other end of the spectrum, you can get caught in large multi-regional bank sales cycle that is 3, 4, 5 years. And in those 3, 4, 5 years, you've had 2 or 3 leadership changes on the other side of a sales cycle. And again, so patience is a trait that has had to be developed. And flexibility and that's the message to the team as well. It's about flexibility. It's about adaptability. And look, we do train consultative or selling in a particular style, but at the end of the day, one style is not going to work in Saudi in the same way that it would work in Ghana or in the same way it would work in Kenya, because the nationalities are different. The experiences in those markets is different. So it's fascinating.
Wow. Brilliant. It's almost sort of multicultural selling sort of 101 here. So it's wonderful to hear this. There'll be so much feedback on this, and I could really feel it. So looking back on your career then, this is the 21-year-old question, Andrew. If you're reflecting back, what do you know now that I know we touched on it earlier, but what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier on in your career, particularly sort of in your 20s or so?
That's a good question. What do I know now? Some of the most motivated, inspirational people I've encountered across my career, worked with, worked for, being customers, are so passionate about what they do. So passionate. It just introduces a whole new level of energy that I love payments. And I'll work in the payments industry until the day I keel over or hang up my shoes. But and yet there's another. If you can find something you are really passionate about, oh, that's so energizing. I look at people who have that level of passion and I'm just jealous. And I'm passionate about what I do, but I'm talking deep to the core passionate about their purpose. So if you can find that, embrace it. Doesn't matter what it is, but embrace it. I think that's the one thing. I think the second thing, and it's hard to take on board, and it's much easier looking back than in the moment, but all experience is good experience.
Yeah, love that. Yeah.
You're going to experience some amazing highs. You're going to experience some horrific lows, and they come in different guises. That's everything from winning the most amazing deal, losing something you've put your heart and soul into, as I said, for years. It's to losing your job. It's to a whole host of different things. But all experience, when you're looking back, all experience is good. So try and embrace it for what it is. And then I think the final one, I wish I'd taken the opportunity to go overseas earlier.
Wow, okay.
And that's not a regret. As I said, some of the roles I've had have given me great opportunities, but I did have opportunities. I could have gone to South Africa in my time with Barclays and Barclaycard. I could have gone even earlier, actually, when I first left school and took a year out before I started studying, went to university. I was playing rugby. I was given the chance to go to New Zealand and play rugby. And I got scared about being so far away from home, being very honest. I didn't take it. And so I think going back to my 18-year-old self or my 21-year-old self would be, the world is a very small place. You're never that far away. Friends and family are hugely important. And that's been one of the most difficult aspects about living in Dubai. Got amazing friends here, very lucky, but family are all elsewhere. They're all 7 or 8 hours away. But I would, to my 21-year-old self, I would say, if the opportunity presents itself, go for it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Andrew, and this is where I normally try and summarize with a couple of key points that have come out of our conversation. But I'm staring at 2 pages of notes here, so I just want to try and summarize the conversation, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think there's it's really interesting how you've embraced opportunities when presented with, and I think it's been a bit of a common theme here. I think the other element for me is about attitude, in almost even above competency in some case, and the right mindset of having the team around you, being human and having a vulnerability and actually sharing some of your actual sort of things that haven't worked out as well with people is a natural connector there. Seems to me that it sounds like you've worked for a proportion of leaders who have been very good and empowering, yet not everybody's been like that. But I love your attitude, which says, do you know what? I'm going to learn it from every single one of them. That's been absolutely key. I think the variety of different organizations and cultures you currently have to work with, being open, being transparent, being accepting, realizing, you say, it could be a 10-minute coffee. Frankly, it could be a 5-year set with different aspects to that. So layering in there the value of personal connection, personal relationships, and also the patience to understand how that's going to work. I love the part at the end about purpose. It's interesting for me just to reflect when I found my purpose in life, which took me to a significant birthday, which is to positively impact 20,000 careers. It's rocket fuel. It gets you out of bed in the morning, and when you've done it, it makes sure you can go to sleep at night. I concur with that one 100%. The other piece for me about the world is a small place. You mentioned New Zealand. You might have to go over the date line and it might take you nearly a day and a half, but you can even get to New Zealand and you've got to leave Earth to go anywhere further. So the world is a small place, It was more about being bold and stepping into that. But the two things that have really stood out for me, the word trust. You've mentioned the word as a thread through the whole of your career. You mentioned it multiple times, Ian, just how important that is. And the second piece for me has also been the value of learning. The value of learning from probably each experience, whether it's a customer, whether it's a leader, feels like, and I suppose the final one for me, though, has been about you don't need to be the smartest in the room. Because if you want to get something done in this payments ecosystem, you want to get something done, do you want, you're going to have to work with a lot of other people. And actually, the key strength is pulling those together. They were my takeaways from today.
That's an amazing summary, Adrian. Thank you. Far more succinctly put than, what are we, 45 minutes in that I managed. So well done. Thank you.
Well, sorry, firstly, I've got the really easy job. Yep. You just give me all the great content and I've got the really easy job. Is there anything else you'd add to what I've just said there?
No, I think that was brilliantly, genuinely brilliantly summarized. Thank you.
Well, look, I have to thank you. There's so much enriched content, and also what I love about this, like everybody on the show, is it's lived. You know, we haven't just talked about a theory, we talked about lived experiences, and thank you for sharing the vulnerabilities of some of those experiences that you've had there as well. So, you know, absolutely thrilled. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Adrian. Take care.